All right, listeners, we're going to put earnings calls on hold for a bit today.
Yeah.
Because we have some major breaking news in the biopharma space to cover. BioNTech, the company that partnered with Pfizer to create the COVID-19 vaccine,
Right.
has agreed to a royalty settlement with the National Institutes of Health.
Huge news.
And the amount is eye-popping.
Yeah.
$7.915 billion.
It's definitely making waves, and for good reason. I mean, to fully grasp the scale of this, we have to kind of step back and remember just how incredibly successful that vaccine was, especially during those early days of the pandemic.
Oh, absolutely.
It was a game changer. The efficacy rates were amazing.
Yeah.
And it really helped us get a handle on all those variants: alpha, beta, gamma, delta, omicron, you name it.
It was a pivotal moment for sure. But as we've seen in recent earnings calls, the market for COVID-19 vaccines is shifting. It's becoming more endemic.
Right.
Demand is softening, and we've seen both Pfizer and BioNTech making some inventory write-offs.
Yeah, and that's what makes the settlement even more fascinating. $7.915 billion. It's a staggering amount, especially when you consider that the market is cooling down.
So what exactly led to this multi-billion-dollar dispute? Well, the NIH claims they hold the rights to certain intellectual property or contributions
Right.
that were crucial in the development of the vaccine.
Yeah, while the exact details of the dispute are still kind of hush-hush, it likely involves specific researchers or technologies that the NIH believes BioNTech used without proper authorization.
Okay.
I mean, the massive size of this settlement is a pretty big indicator that the NIH's claims carried a lot of weight and that the intellectual property in question was extremely valuable.
You're absolutely right. This isn't just some small payout. This implies that the NIH's contribution might have been fundamental to the vaccine's success, possibly even something that BioNTech couldn't have accomplished without their involvement.
Precisely. I mean, think about it. This could potentially be the largest settlement of its kind in the entire pharmaceutical industry. And it sets a major precedent for how future collaborations between private companies and government research institutions are going to play out.
Yeah, this is uncharted territory, and everyone in the biopharma world is going to be watching closely to see how this unfolds. But now let's talk about Pfizer for a second. They've actually been reporting some really strong financial results lately. Their Q3 2024 numbers show solid revenue growth,
Yeah.
driven by Paxlovid, their COVID antiviral, and a bunch of successful acquisitions they've made.
They have a few blockbuster drugs that are really making a difference. The Vyndaqel family, for example, which is used to treat heart disease, is doing extremely well.
Right.
Then there's Eliquis, a major player in the blood clot medication market,
Right.
and Xtandi, which is holding its own in prostate cancer treatment. Of course, there are some older drugs that are seeing declines, like Xeljanz for arthritis and Ibrance for breast cancer.
Okay.
But overall, Pfizer's in a pretty good spot financially.
So the question is, even with their strong performance, can they really just absorb a hit like this? A $7.9 billion settlement. Even for a company as big as Pfizer, that's a huge chunk of change.
It's the big question, isn't it? I mean, as BioNTech's partner, Pfizer's likely going to be on the hook for at least part of that settlement. And while their strong financials do give them some wiggle room, this is still a substantial amount of money. It's a major variable that could really impact their operations and their strategies moving forward.
Yeah, it's definitely something that investors and analysts are going to be scrutinizing for sure. But taking a broader view, what does this settlement tell us about the future of vaccine development?
Well, it certainly raises some interesting questions. Could this impact future collaborations between private companies and research institutions? Will it lead to more clarity or maybe even more complexity when it comes to intellectual property rights in the field?
Right.
And maybe the biggest question of all is, could this have a chilling effect on private investment in vaccine research? If companies start to worry about these billion-dollar royalty battles, are they going to be hesitant to partner with government institutions? It's a valid concern, especially when you consider how crucial these collaborations are for tackling the next big health threats.
Right. You bring up a great point because these partnerships are absolutely vital for the future of medicine.
Absolutely. We could see a shift where these deals become much more carefully structured and potentially even more complex. The need to define IP ownership and how profits are shared with absolute precision right from the start is likely going to become even more crucial.
Yeah, this settlement could end up being a turning point in how these partnerships are formed and managed.
Yeah.
It's a wake-up call for the entire industry. They need to prioritize clarity and transparency when it comes to intellectual property.
Absolutely.
But hey, before we dive any deeper into the potential consequences of all this, let's have a little fun.
Oh, I love our "this is not financial advice" segment.
Okay, so we've got this BioNTech bombshell. What's our outrageous but plausible trade idea swirling around this news?
Right. How about this? We short Pfizer, ticker symbol PFD.
Well, hold on. Shorting Pfizer. You're going to have to walk me through that one.
Okay, so here's the logic. And remember, this is all hypothetical, not financial advice. We're speculating that the market might overreact to the settlement. Even though Pfizer has a pretty solid financial position, investors might get spooked by the massive payout
Okay.
and how it could impact their future earnings.
Interesting. So we're betting on a bit of market jitters impacting Pfizer's stock price.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm following. What kind of entry and exit points are we looking at for this bold move?
Hypothetically, let's say we entered the short position at $65 per share. Our target to cover the short would be $55.
A $10 drop per share? That's ambitious. But then again, a $7.9 billion settlement is pretty ambitious too. What's the reasoning behind those price targets?
Well, the assumption here is that the market overreacts to the news, and that creates a temporary dip in Pfizer's stock price. We're hoping to take advantage of that dip.
And just to emphasize, this is purely hypothetical and for entertainment only. We are absolutely not recommending that anyone actually make this trade.
Absolutely. We are not financial advisors, and this is not a substitute for doing your own research and talking to a qualified professional. Always make informed investment decisions.
All right, disclaimer delivered loud and clear. That was a fun one. Ready to keep digging into this story?
Absolutely. Let's delve deeper. So to really grasp the significance of the settlement, I think we have to kind of rewind a bit and talk about the science behind this Pfizer BioNTech vaccine.
Yeah.
You hear about mRNA all the time, but the story goes much deeper than that.
Yeah.
And this whole dispute with the NIH likely centers around some very specific aspects of that technology.
That's right. Most people didn't really even know what mRNA was until the pandemic hit. But the technology's actually been around for a lot longer.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing this dispute is about very specific elements of it.
Exactly. It wasn't simply about using mRNA in general. The core of the dispute probably revolves around the intellectual property tied to certain techniques. Things like how to stabilize the mRNA molecule because it's incredibly fragile,
Yeah.
how to deliver it effectively into the body's cells. Those were the real battlegrounds.
That sounds incredibly complex. Why were those specific elements so crucial?
Well, they were the key to actually making mRNA vaccines work. You got to remember, mRNA is incredibly delicate. It degrades super quickly, so it needs to be protected to even reach its target inside the cells.
Right.
And the delivery mechanisms, the carriers that transport the mRNA, those are also essential for the vaccine to be effective.
So it wasn't just about using mRNA as a concept, but about figuring out how to actually make it functional.
Right.
And that's where the NIH is claiming their intellectual property played a key role.
That's exactly it. And the settlement amount really suggests that their claim was strong. These technologies were absolutely vital for creating a vaccine that was both stable and effective.
Right.
And that's why the stakes were so high in this dispute.
It really makes you appreciate that even these groundbreaking discoveries like this vaccine
Yeah.
are built upon years of prior research.
Yeah.
And sometimes figuring out who contributed what can get pretty messy, especially when you throw intellectual property into the mix.
Oh, absolutely. This case highlights how important clarity and transparency are in these research collaborations. Especially when you have private companies and government institutions working together, we need to make sure that intellectual property rights are protected, but at the same time, we have to foster an environment of innovation and collaboration.
It's a tricky balance, for sure, especially when you're dealing with technologies that can save lives, like vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
Now, shifting gears a little bit,
Yeah.
let's talk about how Pfizer might be involved in all of this.
Right.
After all, they are BioNTech's partner. How could this impact their finances?
Well, it's safe to assume that Pfizer is going to have to shoulder at least a portion of this massive payout. And, we've talked about their strong financial performance, but even for a giant like Pfizer, $7.9 billion is a huge hit.
Yeah.
This could force them to rethink their strategies going forward.
What kind of strategic shifts could we potentially see?
Well, for one, it could impact their willingness to enter into future partnerships. They might be more hesitant to collaborate with government research institutions, at least
Right.
in the short term,
Right.
or they could become a lot more strict when it comes to negotiating the terms of intellectual property ownership right from the get-go.
That makes a lot of sense. They definitely don't want to find themselves in this kind of situation again.
Exactly. And it could even have an impact on their internal R&D budget. Will they need to scale back certain projects to make up for this unexpected expense?
Right.
There's a lot to consider, and it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out in their upcoming earnings calls and investor presentations.
It's definitely something that investors and analysts will be watching closely. But let's zoom out for a moment and consider the bigger picture.
Yeah.
This settlement has implications that go way beyond just Pfizer and BioNTech. What kind of ripple effects could we see across the entire biopharma industry?
I think this case sends a clear message. Intellectual property is now a major focus in drug development, especially when you're talking about groundbreaking technologies like mRNA vaccines. Companies and research institutions are going to have to be extremely careful about defining who owns what and how profits will be shared.
If you're invested in biopharma, this case is a wake-up call. It's not enough to just focus on the science and the market potential. The legal and intellectual property landscape is now just as important.
Absolutely. And it brings up some pretty big questions about how we encourage innovation while also ensuring that these life-saving medicines are accessible to everyone. If the pursuit of strong intellectual property positions becomes too intense, it could actually hinder collaboration and slow down the development of new treatments.
It's a tough situation with no easy answers. But it's a conversation we need to be having as we think about the future of medicine.
Definitely. This settlement has opened up a whole can of worms, and the answers to these questions are going to shape the biopharma world for years to come. This whole situation got me thinking.
Okay.
We've been talking about the potential market reactions,
Right.
and I think there's an angle we haven't really considered yet.
Okay. All ears.
What if we shift our focus away from Pfizer for a moment
Okay.
and think about BioNTech's position?
Okay.
Yeah, this settlement, it's massive. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
But it doesn't completely wipe them out financially.
Right.
They still have a good chunk of cash reserves
All right.
and a solid pipeline of therapies in development.
You're right. They're not a one-trick pony.
Exactly. And now that this settlement is done, it removes a big legal cloud that was hanging over them. They can really focus on growth.
Yeah.
They have some promising cancer therapies in the works, for example.
Okay. I see where you're going with this.
Mm-hmm.
So while the market might overreact negatively to Pfizer's situation,
Right.
there could be an opportunity with BioNTech.
Exactly. Everyone's so fixated on what this means for Pfizer that they might be missing the fact that BioNTech could come out of this even stronger.
Interesting.
This move could actually boost investor confidence in the long run. It shows they're committed to resolving issues
Right.
and that they're confident about their future.
It's a contrarian view, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Pfizer might face some challenges, but BioNTech could be in a position to benefit from all of this.
Exactly. It's all about perspective.
Right.
And for those investors who are willing to look beyond the headlines, there might be an opportunity here.
Okay, so let's play this out. What would a "this is not financial advice" trade idea look like in this scenario?
All right. Well, if we're going with this contrarian approach, how about a pairs trade?
Okay.
We short Pfizer to capitalize on those potential market jitters. And at the same time, we go long on BioNTech betting on their resurgence.
Oh, hold on a second. Shorting Pfizer and going long on the company that just agreed to a multi-billion-dollar settlement. That's going against the grain.
Remember, this is purely hypothetical,
Oh,
just for fun.
right.
We're just exploring ideas.
Okay.
But the idea is that we're playing the relative performance here. BioNTech doesn't even need to skyrocket for this to work. They just need to outperform Pfizer by a decent margin.
So we're basically betting on a shift in how the market views both of these companies, with BioNTech coming out on top in the long run.
Exactly. It's high risk, high reward, which makes it an outrageous trade idea.
All right, let's break this down. What kind of hypothetical entry and exit points are we talking about for this pairs trade?
Okay, so hypothetically, let's say we enter the short on Pfizer at $65 per share with a target to cover at 55. And at the same time, we buy BioNTech at, let's say, $150 a share, aiming to sell at $180.
So a $10 drop on Pfizer and a $30 jump on BioNTech. Even for an outrageous trade, that's a pretty aggressive target.
It is, but we're banking on BioNTech navigating the situation better than Pfizer and the market eventually recognizing that.
And one more time for everyone listening, this is purely hypothetical, not financial advice.
Absolutely. We are not financial advisors, and this is not a recommendation to make any trades. Always do your research, understand the risks, and consult a professional before making any investment decisions.
Disclaimer delivered loud and clear. That was a fun one. We started with some breaking news, dug into a massive settlement, explored the complexities of mRNA vaccine technology, and even came up with a pretty outrageous trade idea.
It just goes to show that the world of biopharma is never boring.
Yeah, it's a constant roller coaster.
For sure. With scientific breakthroughs, financial maneuvering, and legal battles, and as this BioNTech and NIH case shows, the stakes are incredibly high.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the final thought-provoking takeaway for our listeners today?
This settlement really highlights how crucial intellectual property is for innovation, but it also raises important questions about ownership collaboration and how we make sure everyone has access to these life-saving medicines.
Yeah.
It's a complicated web of issues that will definitely continue to shape the biopharma industry in the years ahead.
And with that, we come to the end of another deep dive. Thanks for joining us.